Welcome to the We as Nature podcast, where inspiring visionaries share their personal stories of living in alignment with the more than human world, and how this informs their unique contribution to cultivating a flourishing future for life on Earth. Each month, We as Nature features a new storyteller, sharing their experience of how listening to and learning from diverse forms of life has altered their course. The power of story lies within each of us, offering a portal to the language of the heart, connecting us to our feelings as a source of inspiration and courage from which we can act. For those of us seeking to create a flourishing world, starting right where we are, these We as Nature stories offer a space to listen, contemplate, and envision new possibilities. We as Nature is brought to you by Flourishing Diversity, and you can find out more about who we are and what we do at the end of the episode, as well as in the show notes. Joining us today is author and beekeeper Sandira Belia, who takes us on an enlightening journey into the intelligence, complexity, and beauty of the queendom of the bees. Born in France to a beekeeping mother, Sandira has bathed in the bee world from a young age. In her early 30s, whilst living in a community in Portugal dedicated to peace research, Sandira felt called to take responsibility for caring for the bees and began to dedicate herself to shifting the orientation from honey production towards bridging the relationship between humans and bees. Through a personal journey of illness, Sandira found herself turning inwards and making a profound connection with the collective soul of the honeybee and the wisdom of the hive, which supported her in healing from fibromyalgia. In the last decade, she's immersed herself within the spiritual and practical responsibilities of the bee queendom, listening to the ways that bees wish to be supported by human beekeepers. Sandira is the founder of Bee Wisdom, a website sharing resources, teachings, and artwork, and linking a network of people around the world who are working with a deeply holistic understanding of the bees. She's also the author of Bee Wisdom, Teachings from the Hive, a beautiful book full of Sandira's bee-inspired artwork and astonishing insights into bee relationships. Sandira's story is an empowering and inspiring reminder that as human beings we have the innate capacity to communicate with different species and the lands we inhabit, and how valuable this is for the harmonic equilibrium of life on Earth. We will shortly play approximately 1 minute of sounds from inside the beehive. Wherever you are, take a moment to pause and notice the space around you. Observe the breath coming and going from your body, feeling the movement within, as we move towards a space of listening.
My name is Sandira. Really happy to be here today. I was born in France, in Brittany, northwest of France. And recently I found a picture. I'm 5 years old. And in this picture, you can see me from behind. I'm squatting with my little boyfriend, Merlin. We're both mesmerized by a cloud of bees. We're settling into a new hive. Surrounded by flowers, we're observing, calm, fearless, naked. So one could say, which reasonable mother would expose her daughter or two young kids to maybe 10,000, even 20,000 bees flying in the air? So my mother was a beekeeper. And of course, she knew that this type of honeybees would never sting or intentionally attack anyone who would be around during the phase of swarming. Swarming is the moment where a new baby colony is born. The daughter is leaving the mother's hive and searching for a new place to settle, a new home. And during this phase, she doesn't have anything to protect. And it's an absolutely wonderful experience to witness the flight of the swarm. She's creating all sorts of patterns in the sky. And in this case, they had found a new home, which was this little empty hive that my mother had put there. So as you can see, I was very early on bathed into the hum of bees. So the smell of honey and the abundance was there every summer, except when we would have a rainy summer. Brittany is quite wet. So there would be years where it was also associated with pressure, because this was our way of surviving. And honey production was threatened, and our financial situation was threatened, depending on the weather. So many, many years later, I never thought actually I would work with bees one day. Many years later, I was 32 and I was living in Portugal, in the south of Portugal, in a community called Tamera, which is a peace research center of 180 people living together. And the person who was caring for the bees was searching for a replacement. She was a bit in a despair because the bees were not thriving. And I felt this yes in the depth of my cells. And I knew I would not be a honey producer. I knew I wanted to care for the bees with a different approach, which was not production oriented. My passion was to bridge bees and human, to bridge nature and humans. And the bees are an incredible messenger, an incredible guide for us to discover about nature's cycles, about the interconnectivity of all things, about community. So for several years, I've been caring for the bees in this community. And then life brought to me one of the biggest challenge I faced in this life, which was a health condition, very challenging health condition. So that is named fibromyalgia, which is a syndrome, and in my case, characterized with a set of symptoms, which was a very drastic loss of weight, dysfunctional digestive system, and chronic pain everywhere in the body. So after some years, I was not able to stay in that community. It was becoming too intense. I had to move to the neighborhood. But I continued working with the bees in the whole region. I met my incredibly amazing partner in that journey, Annalika, who was coming from a burnout. So she was having really hard time with her mind when I was having very hard time with my body. So we were a good team. And together we've been exploring the wisdom of the hive. I started slowly to more and more communicate with a being that I call the Deva of the hive, or Deva of the bees. The Deva of the bees is the collective soul of the honeybee. It's collective intelligence with whom one can communicate and receive wisdom, receive knowledge. So in this healing journey, I was somehow brought to turn more and more inward. And I was discovering that inside a hive, there are several different archetypes who can speak to you, which I call the fruits of the hive. You have, of course, honey, pollen, wax, propolis, and bee venom. In my case, bee venom has been an incredible support in my healing journey, as at some point I was so weak that I was having a hard time to walk. I was merely skin and bones, and the bee venom brought me back to connect with my life force, to bring back energy, especially in my legs. So I was having these conversations with the fruits of the hive, and I would say the pivot, I'm not sure of the word in English, pivotal moment in that whole dark night of the soul, as we could call it, was the moment where I met Lady Death. I met Death in a very sweet way. For a long time, I had resisted to her energy. I was pushing her away. I was like, no way, I'm going to heal fast and I'm going to get out of it. And at some point, the bees have been my guide, in that case, my spiritual guide, to actually surrender to the possibility of dying. And from this point, that's when I could find that flame, that anchor inside my heart, my womb, to decide to live. And from there on, I've been recovering. The bees has also been my muse. She's an incredible ally into arts. So I've been starting to paint, to write this book, to dance and sound. She is a teacher of vibrations. She's a dancer. So I could spend a full hour on each of this. I'm calling in which one would like to be expressed. I'm going to talk about the wisdom of the wax, beeswax. So in conventional beekeeping that my mother was doing, usually use foundations of wax sheets, and you impose to the bees a way to build their own cells. These little hexagon cells, which will be the storage for the honey, as well as the cradles for the baby bees. What I discovered in our journey with Annelieke and Bee Wisdom Network that was starting to flourish is that when you leave the bees building their own combs, there is actually an incredible wisdom in the way they will do it. And this entry for me into sacred geometry has been fascinating. So one thing is that they will, for example, in the hive, the combs are all parallel to each other. And they will choose to attune with the different networks, energy networks of the earth, and orient their combs depending on these networks. They will also choose a certain angle in the way they will create their cells. All these angles I discovered were connected with the sacred number 5, the golden number. And walks for me was a big teacher about structure. So as I said, I was skin and bones. So I had a big journey about reconnecting with my anchor, my ground, my roots, and also discovered that bones actually have an hexagonal structure in their in the way they are created. So this connection with the wisdom of the walks helped me to reform, reshape, recreate myself from that original structure point. At the same time, walks is a very flexible structure. It's not a structure that's rigid, that's crystallized. It's a structure that leaves space for creativity, for movement. So that's an example of how the fruits of the hive have been my teachers and my healers. I could maybe say a few words about venom. So bee venom has quite a bad reputation. Of course, there is a default picture of honeybees, which are scary because they sting. And more we actually come to realize that bee venom is an incredible medicine. So bees have different ways to use bee venom. The first way is a protective mechanism. So if you come into the aura of a beehive and you go too fast, aura meaning not the hive itself, solid, but all the layers of her auras, then she might push you away and send you either a guard who will like push, sometimes just make you like a little poke, or right away sting you. If you stop, you feel where is the door of the aura of the hive, and then you stand there and then you connect heart to heart and say, I'd like to come closer. Is it okay for you? Like you'd knock before entering the house of a friend, right? Then you may find that the aura of the hive is opening. It's like sucking you in. So the first use of venom for the beehive is a defensive. And then there is also a healing function. So I was, for example, once in the bee garden. So in Tamera, in that big community, I co-created a bee garden, which is a place full of aromatics, herbs. And I was weeding there, the herbs. And it was the beehive, very calm, beautiful day. And this girl was sharing about a pain she had on her shoulder since the day before. And at this moment, there's a bee coming and stopping on her shoulder and stinging her exactly at the place of the pain. She was absolutely not in a defensive mechanism in that case. She was feeling that there was a blockage of energy, and she was offering her venom in service for the healing of that girl. So the day after, because she was a bit impressed. She was not used to bees, so I was accompanying her to relax and let the medicine sink in, lay down, breathe, touch the ground. And the day after, she was really excited to tell me that the pain had gone. Yeah. So that's the healing value healing qualities of the hive. And when I was in the bottom of that dark night of the soul, I actually asked the hives if they would offer me some venom that I could apply to myself. I obviously learned it before I visited an apitherapist, who is a professional using bee venom. And at first I was really a bit insecure about the idea, because I knew that most of the time the bee would die when you would take or use her venom. And she answered that the bee is a cell of a superorganism. She's not an individual. And the whole journey, the whole theme here of integrity is to do it in contact, to do it in full respect, to ask for the blessing in the hive. And in this case, I could feel that I was given this blessing each time I would collect bees for my venom sessions. I would receive the blessing of the hive. I would even choose. I had 3 different beehives with very different personalities around my dome, my home. And one was she was called Inanna, like the mother goddess. So had very grounding universal energy. Another one was called Tiamat, had a dragon, very sharp energy. And the third one was called Gaia, much more playful. And I would instinctively know which quality I would like to connect with during the venom, this specific venom session. So yes, this journey I followed it during several months, and it has been an incredible shift in my energy. I'm really thankful for this being to be part of my life and to have been my best counselor in this crossing of the desert.
We'd like to thank Sandira for sharing her enchanting story. We now have a couple of suggested prompts to spark reflection, whether this be by yourself or perhaps in conversation with others. The first one is, do you recall a time when the natural world supported you in your own process of healing in some way? You might wish to consider this through the lens of physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual healing. And the next prompt is, are there any moments where you have felt attuned to the unspoken wisdom of another species? How would you describe this experience? Thanks for being with us today. If you'd like to find out more about Sandira and her work with bees, including her book, Bee Wisdom, Teachings from the Hive, head to the links in the show notes. And lastly, if you enjoyed this episode, please do share it with your loved ones. You can also help spread the word by leaving a review. The We as Nature podcast is recorded live during an online gathering where each month a new guest shares their story and attendees enjoy the opportunity to connect with other listeners. You can find a link to our upcoming We as Nature live events, which are free to attend, in the show notes. We as Nature is brought to you by Flourishing Diversity, an initiative bringing together voices from all over the world to explore humanity's interconnection with the lands, waters, forests, and fellow species. Flourishing Diversity is a path towards a vibrant future and offers a collective approach in response to climate breakdown and biodiversity loss. We create spaces to listen to and learn from all life, raise critical questions, search for alternative answers, and amplify generative biocultural practices. You can register to receive updates and inspiration from us at flourishingdiversity.com, as well as finding us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and LinkedIn. All the links are in the show notes. Thanks for being here, and we hope you'll join us again soon.